Hey folks, I'm Dr. Jamara Welch of the Supermodel Society, where we seek to influence, educate, and inspire. Did you know that according to the Institute for Policy Studies, if average Black family wealth continues to grow at the same pace it has over the past 3 decades, it will take Black families 228 years to amass the amount of wealth that white families have today. By the way, that's from a study done in 2016. I know, it's shocking, right? Well, stay tuned for more, as I'm going to be talking with you today about the racial wealth gap here in America and things that we can do to combat it. A foremost issue of catastrophic economic proportions is the mounting wealth gap here in America. According to the Pew Research Center and CNN Business, as of 2016, upper income families had 75 times the wealth of lower income families. Stated another way, according to a Washington Post article, the notorious American 1% owns approximately 40% of the nation's wealth. Concerning lower, middle, and upper income households, according to the Pew Research Center, as of 2016, lower income households had incomes less than $45,200, whereas upper income household had incomes higher than $135,600. In contrast, middle income households, which is approximately 52% of the U.S. population, had incomes ranging from $45,200 to $135,600. Among the wealthy nations of the world, the United States stands out for its wealth inequality in that it owns a much larger share of the country's wealth than the 1% elsewhere. Moreover, the median wealth of American upper income families, which is approximately $810,000 as of 2016, that's a 10% gain post the Great Recession, is at the highest level since the Federal Reserve started collecting these data in 1983. At no surprise, these gaps in wealth are even starker across racial and ethnic lines, which is most pronounced between white households and so-called Black or African American, as well as Latinx households. The Great Recession drove wealth inequality in America to the highest levels recorded. And who knows what those gaps will look like when we reach the post-pandemic era. Post-Great Recession, as of 2016, the median wealth of white households was $171,000. That's 10 times the wealth of Black households, which is $17,100. That's a larger gap than in 2017. And it's 8 times that of Hispanic households, which is $20,600. That was about the same as in 2007. You see, this extreme wealth inequality is bad for a nation's economy. In fact, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, which is an organization that represents some of the wealthiest nations on the planet, the US included, noted that wealth inequality knocked nearly 5 percentage points off economic growth in 19 OECD countries between 1985 and 2005. It's also important to note that there is a persistent Black-white wealth gap, regardless of marital status, income, age, and even educational attainment, all of which are factors that are typically associated with rising wealth. In a 2018 report by the Center for American Progress, report called Systematic Inequality: How America's Structural Racism Helped Create the Black-White Wealth Gap, the researchers contend that Blacks who have higher education levels, are married, and obtain higher incomes still acquire significantly less wealth than whites who lack those qualifications. For example, when comparing wealth between African Americans who have attained a college degree to that of whites without a degree, on average, African Americans still make 30% less. And for those of you who believe that personal finance choices are the primary reasons why African Americans have less wealth, I would caution you from such an assumption. In a recent Duke University study entitled Race and Consumption, Black and White Disparities in Household Spending, this study looked at specific categories of spending, and the researchers note the following. For clothing, jewelry, personal care, entertainment, eating out, as well as other non-essential spending, their findings show that Black consumers, in fact, spend the same or much less than whites at all income levels. The only category in which African American households were found to consistently spend more was for, you guessed it, utilities. Pointing to data from 2013 and 2014 consumer expenditure surveys in their report called The Asset Value of Whiteness, Understanding the Racial Wealth Gap, researchers found that the average white household spends 1.3 times more than the average African American household. And yes, family structure, income, occupation, geography, and home ownership were taken into account when coming up with that figure. Taking into consideration everything that has been discussed, you may be wondering, what are the key factors that have contributed to this racial wealth inequality that we experience here in the U.S., particularly between Blacks and whites? At no surprise, the long-term impact of U.S. chattel slavery, deeply rooted institutionalized racism, employment discrimination, high denial rates when applying for credit, which is often used to acquire real estate and fund business ventures, targeted mass incarceration, and the overall systematic breakdown of African American nuclear families, to name a few, have been the major contributors to this vicious cycle of extreme wealth inequality. These factors have consistently impeded and many times have inhibited African Americans from having access to opportunities that realize economic success. At a most basic level, vital wealth building instruments are home ownership, having other private investments such as stocks and bonds, and owning a business. And even though these are pillars of wealth, time and time again, African Americans have had to traverse through intentionally designed obstacles that have served as barriers to acquiring, maintaining, and obtaining returns from assets that often translate into real wealth. In another Institute for Policy Studies report titled Dreams Deferred, How Enriching the 1% Widens the Racial Wealth Divide, it is asserted that the median Black family is on track to reach zero wealth, zero wealth by 2082. Although this report paints a very bleak picture on the economic future for African Americans, I personally am convinced that all is not lost. African Americans are a very talented, resourceful, and exceptional group of people. And I firmly believe that through collective wealth building efforts, such as acquiring real estate, investing in stocks, cryptocurrencies, gold and silver, and of course, establishing and supporting thriving Black-owned businesses, that African Americans can and will work as a unified body to turn the economic tide in the right direction for our people and our future generations. More on economic prosperity central to entrepreneurship. In their report titled The Tapestry of Black Business Ownership in America, Untapped Opportunities for Success, this was a report funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. The Association for Enterprise Opportunity, or the AEO, found that the gap in average wealth between Black and white adults decreases from a multiplier of 13 to 3 when you compare the wealth of business owners by race. Let that sink in. Again, it decreases from a multiplier of 13 to 3 when we look at business owners by race. This is all the more reason why African Americans must be intentional and diligent about developing and supporting Black-owned businesses. Now, I realize that I just shared a ton of data. That said, if you're interested in reading the full article in which I talk about this important topic, just click down below in the description bar where I've linked the article. It goes to my website, the Supermodel Society, which is my quarterly online magazine. And there you'll read the articles titled The Racial Wealth Gap. In addition, I also encourage you to read some of the other articles and editorials on the site that discuss business and wealth. We also cover other topics too. And if you like what you see, I ask that you subscribe to the magazine as well as subscribe to my channel. With that, I'm going to bring this to a close, and I thank you so much for your time and for listening. Blessings to all.